Hello, and thank you for joining this live digital conversation from wherever you are. Technology has proven to be more than a good friend, actually very dependable in these COVID-19 times. For you, my friends and followers on social media, I'm happy to continue to avail myself and interact with you. At the end of this evening session, I'll take a few questions, as I usually do, on the issues that I'll be raising. Just prefix your question with the hashtag #JohnMahamaLive. Thank you. My brothers and sisters, one of our best and most enduring qualities as Ghanaians is that, notwithstanding the nature or extent of adversity we encounter, we as a people have always been positive in our philosophical outlook. It is this strength of character that in many ways have determined our approach to life. And this is why I do not have any doubt that with the Almighty God on our side, with the specialist knowledge and professionalism of our medical practitioners and experts, with the ever-present creativity and industry of our people, and with every single one of our people united towards a common purpose of conquering the coronavirus pandemic, we shall overcome this current existential threat we face. I pray for God's overwhelming healing power for those who are sick, including even those who are asymptomatic. I console bereaved families and commend our gallant health workers and our men and women in uniform, service personnel, for their sacrifices towards our common quest to heal our land of this pandemic. When we close the chapter on the year 2019 and we welcome 2020 with the usual fanfare and jubilation, we could not have predicted that so early into the year, almost every aspect of our life will be so profoundly affected by a global pandemic that has brought countries on every continent to their knees. But the signs were on the wall. Our schools are closed. Our churches and mosques are shut down. Some of our markets are closed or heavily regulated. Our movements have been curtailed, and anxiety has become a palpable reality of our daily lives. Guided by our very recent experience in our sub-region, the effect of this virus in many ways is like the Ebola virus that ravaged our West African neighbors, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, a few years ago. I recall at the time there was a clear thought in mind when I stood before the United Nations and also Westminster to galvanize support for our neighbors who were suffering. I stated that Ebola was a virus that compromised our impulse of touch and closeness to comfort our loved ones who were infected. I mentioned that Ebola was a disease of isolation, and worse, it left many survivors ostracized and stigmatized. Care and affection are basic human traits, and when a virulent disease such as Ebola makes it impossible to show care and affection to our relatives, to our friends and loved ones, not even to get close or hug them, it is a most strange and difficult proposition. Sadly, these unfortunate developments are playing out before our very eyes with the current coronavirus disease. This is exactly when our brothers in Nigeria in February became the first in our sub-region to report a case of the coronavirus, I immediately called for an aggressive preventive measure to be put in place so that the disease does not spread into Ghana. We all hoped and prayed that this will not happen, but it was not to be. But now that it's here, we owe it to the people of Ghana to ensure that every attention, every decision, every human and material resource should be aimed solely at stopping the spread of the virus. We must manage cases to ensure speedy recovery and continue to have and build a secure and united country at the end of it all. In all these, my thoughts have also been on the state of our country after the pandemic. How different will our world and our country, Ghana, look from the world that we have known before? No country, nobody will go back to business as usual. In the coming days, I look forward to hosting further digital conversations on how we can rebuild our country, Ghana, and prepare it for the changes that are to come. I'll work with you all to prepare our country, Ghana, for the new world which will emerge after this pandemic. For now, however, my brothers and sisters, I trust that you're doing well and that you're staying safe and that you're taking the necessary steps to prevent yourselves and your families from getting infected with this deadly virus that we have to battle with. Staying safe no matter what is what we must all strive to do. Because as you may have also heard, in the model government is working with, the projection is that up to 3 million Ghanaians may be infected by the virus. And a significant number will require hospitalization or may even die from the virus. In his last address to the country, the President, Nana Akufo-Addo, lifted the partial lockdown imposed on Greater Accra, Greater Kumasi, and their environs, and Kaswa. At the time the country was recording increasingly higher infections, it was therefore not surprising that many Ghanaians, including public health experts, were puzzled about the considerations underlying the President's decision. The number of infections are not only rising steeply, but there's also clearly a horizontal community spread of the virus. The majority of the regions in our country have reported cases, and the bulk of the positive cases we are seeing are of people who have no history of foreign travel. One wonders whether, in his decision, consideration was given to the huge backlog of tests that have not yet been cleared, and the many possible cases roaming in our communities that have not yet been tested due to a lack of mass testing. Using the examples of countries that are seeing a decline in their case numbers, the science shows that public awareness on prevention protocols, accurate data, widespread testing, effective contact tracing, isolation, treatment, and care are the critical factors for success in overcoming COVID-19. Transparent and accurate data is critical if we are to achieve a better and deeper appreciation of the trajectory of this contagious disease in Ghana. Unfortunately, many health professionals have begun to question the credibility of the data and models being used by our national COVID-19 team. While it is the prerogative of the President to take the decisions that ensure our safety and protection, it is my hope that his decisions are guided by a genuine concern for the health and safety of the people of Ghana, and are also guided by science, not any political or parochial considerations. It is unfortunate that a high-ranking member of the President's party has suggested in recent days that the Electoral Commission should and will go ahead with the compilation of a new voters' register as soon as next month, no matter how many Ghanaians die. At a time when doubts remain about the scale of the COVID-19 threat, and when social distancing has become our main defense, this suggestion is deeply irresponsible. Outbursts like this create doubt in the minds of the public if there are no political underpinnings to the president's decision. At this stage, we can only hope that consideration was given to the fact that the effects of the initiatives such as the local manufacture of personal protective equipment, PPEs, are yet to be felt in our health system. I must say, I'm deeply concerned about the health and safety of our health workers, considering that there are still loud complaints from many health facilities about the lack of basic protective gear. We need to protect our hard-working health workers. Not a day passes without emails, phone calls, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and WhatsApp messages from nurses and other medical staff from facilities across the country reaching out to my office and pleading for protective gear, PPEs. Right from the start of this pandemic, public education and awareness has been poor. Messages must be crafted in all the local languages and aired extensively on all our media of mass communication. The current scenes in our markets and public places suggest that the President's exhortation for self-discipline has largely not been heeded. Now that the lockdown has been lifted and the virus is mobile again, we must heed to the call to always wear face masks or face coverings in all public places. Government should speed up the initiative of manufacturing locally made masks, which can be washed and pressed or ironed and reused again. These should be handed out free of charge to the public. Strong public education on the safe use of masks must accompany this initiative. One gets the sense that perhaps because of the current low mortality in the cases we have confirmed so far, the President might be seeking to rely on what is called herd immunity as a strategy to fight COVID-19. But I dare say this is dangerous. We must remember that there are reports of reinfection occurring in some cases elsewhere. And also, prolonged immunity to the virus has not yet been proven at this stage. The example of the UK at the initial stages of the pandemic, relying on possible herd immunity, is a stark reminder of the dangers of such a strategy. Eventually, Prime Minister Boris Johnson nearly became a casualty of the virus. While it is true that the rate of hospitalization among those testing positive in Ghana is lower than in the UK, it is also true that we have a weaker and less efficient health system than the UK. The burden of the coronavirus disease could potentially be very heavy. COVID-19 has overwhelmed the health systems of most advanced countries and can do the same in Ghana. The toll on our healthcare workers could be devastating. You can buy ventilators and other medical items on the market, but you cannot go to the market and buy skilled doctors and nurses and other medical staff. As it is, we are currently relying on hope. Hope is good, but science helps you to hope better. It is important to note that government's humanitarian intervention to alleviate the unintended but predictable consequences of the lockdown have been an abysmal failure. The distribution of food was chaotic and disorderly, and in some cases partisan. It flouted all protocols of social distancing and prevention of the spread of the virus. Definitely no careful planning went into the implementation of this initiative, as is characteristic of this current administration. My suggestion to involve assembly members and traditional rulers, religious leaders, and civil society organizations were ignored. As the president clearly admitted, this was one of the reasons for the lifting of the lockdown. Many Ghanaians were faced with two choices: either to stay at home and die of hunger, or come out and take their chance against the deadly virus. Faced with these two choices, most Ghanaians opted for the latter. I therefore can understand and I empathize with the sports of jubilation that greeted the announcement of the president of the lifting of the partial lockdown. With a budget in excess of 1.2 billion cedis from the Stabilization Fund, I believe we could have handled this mitigation effort much better than we did. Examples from some of our fellow African countries, including Togo, our neighbor, Cote d'Ivoire, our neighbor, and Rwanda, demonstrate how an extended period of lockdown can be supported by a well-coordinated, enhanced, and effective social mitigation program. My office has been flooded with correspondence from many working-class people, especially in the private sector, who have not received their February and March salaries and are having a difficult time feeding and taking care of their families. The lockdown may have been lifted, but many businesses are still down and suffering. Employees are suffering too, just as the many players in the informal sector are also suffering. It makes me wonder why our Social Security and National Insurance Trust has not been responsive in this time of need of many of its contributors. Social Security contributions are essentially an insurance scheme made not just for pensions in old age before we die. They are also meant to help contributors in times of adversity such as this. Remember that not all will come out and queue for food. Not all will come out of their homes to receive the food boxes that we go around and hand over. But as has been done in other countries like St. Lucia, I think a token payment of all contributors of a certain token sum over 3 months would have afforded many the assurance of feeding their families during these abnormal times. While we wait for a clearing understanding of the factors underpinning the decision of the president to relax efforts to manage the spread of the virus, I urge all Ghanaians to continue to be responsible and not to assume that the country is out of the woods yet because of the removal of the lockdown. I want to strongly encourage all my fellow citizens, particularly the aged and those with underlying medical conditions, to continue to remain at home. The young are also advised to exercise precaution because in the reality of the COVID-19 Russian roulette, and for those who don't know Russian roulette, Google it, nobody knows who will live and who will die. If you please have nothing essential or urgent to do outside, please continue to stay at home. Avoid shaking hands or joining large gatherings. Let us regularly wash our hands with soap and under running water, or resort to the use of alcohol-based hand sanitizers where possible. Continue practicing social distancing or stay at least 1 meter away from anybody you are with or talking to when you step out of your house. And please wear a mask to protect yourself and others from infection. On this note, I commend and congratulate all who are working and producing masks locally, including the Medical Women Association of Ghana, Dr. Jifaku Wonu and her colleagues who are also producing masks to support the fight against COVID-19 and the many others who are doing so. I still urge those who can afford to show compassion and share whatever you have with the less fortunate, especially the vulnerable, including people with disability, to continue to do so. Let us all join hands in demanding accountability and transparency from the government in the management of the COVID-19 funds. After all, these are public funds contributed by taxpayers. And I'm passionately appealing to government to ensure a timely release of these funds to the institutions, health and non-health, so that they can discharge their duties appropriately and according to plan. I wish to also repeat my call for government to ensure a reduction in the cost of internet, because students and pupils need internet to study from home. They've been home for over a month, and some students are really struggling to cope with the cost implications of the online lectures they are taking. In similar vein, let me also encourage the need to allow for flexibility at workplaces in order that people can continue to work from home where and when necessary. Issues have been raised about the discrepancies in data on COVID-19 put out by the government. Some of these discussions have been led by the renowned Ghanaian pathologist and former director of the Ghana Health Services, Professor Ajiman Bedu Akosa. I urge government to adopt the attitude of assurance and reassurance while explaining the sources and nature of the data discrepancies in the data, because we need to build trust, transparency, and confidence in the process and the fight against the virus. It does not help our collective fight against COVID-19 when some overzealous appointees resort to insulting persons who question the information being put out by government. While thinking and working locally, we must also keep an eye on treatments and/or vaccine development. This will ensure affordability and availability of drugs and vaccines when they become available. I called a few weeks ago for a virtual ECOWAS summit in order that our leaders can coordinate the response to the pandemic in respect of border restrictions and sub-region-wide COVID-19 response measures. I'm happy and heartened to hear that such a meeting has taken place or is planned in order to better coordinate our fight against the virus. This is necessary in order to avoid unilateralism in what is a collective struggle. We did this during the Ebola outbreak, and it served the sub-region well. For instance, it is reported that Ghana's unilateral decision to lift the lockdown has put extreme pressure on our neighbors to do likewise, even though we are all not sure whether Ghana's decision is the best course of action to take at this time. We're dealing with a new disease and are not yet sure how it will behave going forward. Meanwhile, let me once again underscore the need for testing of Ghanaians for COVID-19. Now that we have lifted the lockdown, government must truly expand our testing capacity by fast-tracking regional testing centers to remove the long delays before results reach hospitals and patients. Such delays do not only cause anxiety among the patients and health workers, but also lead to inadvertent spread of the infection. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that as a nation, for us to succeed, we need to see from the government that leads us a demonstration of trust and respect for all, no matter which people are involved or where they're coming from. We must be open to constructive criticism and be receptive to the pragmatic suggestions from experts, because these are critical ingredients that will engender trust and a collective will to support the battle we're engaged in with this pandemic. It is not too late for us to unite, truly unite, and to be transparent and accountable to the people. My fellow citizens, countrymen and women, we're not in normal times. We must all put our shoulders to the wheel with patriotic zeal, devoid of partisanship and parochial interest, and help with all our hearts and might to fight COVID-19 aggressively and decisively. And I believe together we will win. Thank you. And I'll now proceed to read out some questions that you've posted to my Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter handles. I thank you for your attention. And so we go to the questions. Amabuahima asks, you lost as president. Why are you trying to run a parallel government? You set up your own COVID-19 team and you went distributing food. Just leave His Excellency Nana Addo alone to govern. I'm a citizen of Ghana, and the president urged us to be citizens, not spectators. And I'm also the leader of the largest opposition party. And it is in the interest of the country that the voice of the 4 million or more people who voted for me is heard. And I believe that by offering other suggestions, it would help the government to protect all of us. And so I'm just being a citizen and not a spectator. Thank you. Your Excellency, John Dramani Mahama, please come to the aid of private school teachers. We're really suffering. I am Florence Amatefio from Okaikwe. Florence, thank you very much for your question. And I empathize with what you're going through. And I believe that that is why the role of the Social Security and National Insurance Trust can come in. Because for those of you in the formal sector, SNIT contributions are paid for you. And so if a token amount of your contribution is paid over the next 3 months, it should be able to fend you through these abnormal times. And so I'll urge that government sits with the Social Security and National Insurance Trust and see how it can give a little check to people during this time so that they can survive the troubling times we are in. Here's a suggestion from Jeffrey Avinu. The government must institute unemployment benefit tax so people who lose their jobs can draw 70% of their salary from the fund. Yes, this exists in many areas. Many workplaces have provident funds and others, and I think that this is where all those provident funds and the Social Security must come in. At times when there's a disaster or there's a massive disruption to people's lives, I think that it is a time when provident funds and Social Security funds should make a little contribution to tide their contributors over the adverse period. And so it's a suggestion that I agree with, and I have made it in the statement that I just read. Elliot Elewodrom, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Please, sir, we know you care about the health of Ghanaians, but listening to ordinary people, Ghanaians are happy that they are out of the 3 weeks lockdown, because lockdown without food items to households was like a hell to most Ghanaians. I agree with you. Lockdown without a properly planned human intervention becomes a major problem. And so I can understand that most people opted to come out onto the streets and face the virus rather than stay home and starve. And so I believe that the interventions that were made should have been better planned so that households could receive, food alleviation while they stayed indoors. Unfortunately, that was not the case. And so people, jubilated. Some people jubilated when the president lifted the lockdown. There are examples that we see of many of our people, many of our neighbors who are doing this very well. And as a result of that, food is delivered to households and they're able to survive the lockdown. Just a minute. Give it to me. From Armstrong. Why did you take the fight against COVID-19 so seriously when your opponent did not make any efforts during the Ebola outbreak? They were rather making serious allegations against you. The COVID-19 virus pandemic is similar to what we experienced during the Ebola epidemic. And having served at the time as leader of this nation and as president, between 2014 and 2016, when the outbreak was finally dealt with, I knew the implications of a pandemic and how easily it could spread. And so with that experience, I thought that it was necessary for me to lend whatever expertise and suggestions I had to the current government so that we are able to protect ourselves. Because we're all in this together. Nobody knows who will live and who will die or who will be affected by the pandemic. And so I've done all I can. Unfortunately, some people misunderstand, my gestures. But as a Ghanaian and as a true patriot and a citizen, I'll continue to make suggestions and to give off of the experience that my country has so generously imbued me with. Shine Gave said, economists are forecasting that our economy will face a recession next year and beyond. Should elections be held and you become president in 2021, how will you face the challenge to recover the economy? Shine, thank you for your question. And in reflecting on this question, this is one of the issues we have continuously talked about, that it is always necessary when you're building an economy to have enough buffers and create fiscal space so that when you are faced with a shock or adversity, you are easily able to overcome it. Unfortunately, this government has used a lot of propaganda. They said the economy has been the best that we've ever had since independence. Unfortunately, just 1 month of coronavirus, and the economy is in ICU. If we didn't run to the IMF for the 1 billion rapid credit facility, it is possible that in the next 2 months, probably salaries could not have been paid. And so our economy is on ventilators, and it needs thinking to rescue it from the ICU. And that is why we are continuing to review what government is doing. We're looking at what the figures are. I have my team working. We had worked with what was available to us before COVID, but we have to review that because next year, as the finance minister said, he says it's going to take 3 years for the economy to come back on its feet. And I remember that a leading member of this government told us our economy was so robust and we had such reserves that for 3 months, if anything happened to us, we will be able to survive. We've not been able to survive even 1 month. And so we will be able to recover our economy, and we're looking at, what to put in place in order that we're able to recover. But there are things that the government can do in the first place. One of the main things you do when you're faced with adversity like this and shocks to the economy is to cut expenditure, frivolous expenditure. And that's why I said this is the time to look for the president to look at the number of his ministers and appointees. Definitely the public service is bloated, especially political appointees. And when you're asking people to sacrifice, you must show that you're sacrificing yourself. You can't have appointees running all over the place and drawing free fuel, and thousands of them, just all over the place, 125 ministers, and you're asking the people to sacrifice. We're all going to sacrifice. It's going to take sacrifice to rebuild this economy. And the president and the government must show the first example that they're ready to sacrifice. Thank you. Alassane Abdul Fattah, Your Excellency, your vision is too much. I think if SNIT was to mitigate our plights by paying a token of our contribution, it would have cushioned us during this trying time. Fattah, I think you are on par with me, and I hope that the executives of SNIT are listening and the government is listening, and if they can quickly, make a token payment monthly between now and April is almost ended, but between now, next month, June, July, and probably August, a token amount of their contribution so that they can buy food and survive until we get through this pandemic. Mr. President, we've had 9 deaths from COVID so far, but here in the Upper West region, we've lost more people to CSM. It's really sad. Idrisu from Upper West, thank you for your question. I drew attention to the CSM outbreak when I was told that 37 people had died and that more than 200 people had been infected with CSM and had required hospitalization. Unfortunately, vaccinations have not taken place. What we had done in the past, and we need to interrogate the history of vaccinations. What we had done in the past, at least I know when I was in government, that every year in advance of the CSM season, we did an immunization exercise and a public awareness exercise. We sent people out to educate people on what the mode of infection of CSM is and how they can take care of themselves. And we vaccinated the most vulnerable and people who could come down with the disease. Since we left office in 2017, 2018, 2019, I don't know if any mass immunization for CSM has taken place or if any public education has taken place. But if it hasn't, then what we need to do is, if we have vaccines, to do some vaccination quickly, because the CSM period continues until the rains open up. And so there's a little while to go. And so if we can do this quickly, we better do it. And then we should also send drugs so that those who fall sick are treated of CSM. What happens with CSM is, if you identify the symptoms early and you go to a hospital, you can be treated because antibiotics and other drugs are available. But if the people are not educated to recognize the symptoms and realize that I need to go to hospital immediately, they'll stay at home, and by the time they come to hospital, it's too late. So Ghana Health Service, this is for your attention. Hassan Muman, why do you share the food yourself without giving them to your aides? Hassan, thank you for this question. I believe that in times of adversity and when you have serious issues like the pandemic that we have been going through, it is necessary for us to show leadership. And that's why I believe that by going out myself safely and maintaining social distancing with a mask and using sanitizers, it is possible for our leaders to come out so that our people see that you empathize with them. If we all go and hide in our homes and leave the people to their fate, then I don't think it's really a mark of leadership. We must feel emboldened. We're asking the people to come out and go about their business, but they should maintain social distancing and they should go through all the protocols. Let us come out ourselves and use all those protocols so that our people know that we have confidence in what we are saying. And so that's why I went out myself. Apart from that, I wanted to show that house-to-house distribution of food was possible. We informed the authorities in the area that I was coming. We made sure that the people knew we're coming. And we said that anybody who is outside his home will not receive the food. We had 200 packs of food, and we had selected 200 households. The houses had been identified, and so when I got there, we knew exactly which houses we were going to. And you'll be surprised, everybody obeyed, everybody stayed at home, and the food was delivered, to those households. And so it's something we can do. We have the GPS, and the GPS should show us the location of every house. We can take every electoral area and map it out and know how many households are in Choko or in Agbogloshi or Dododiodo. We should be able to tell. And based on that, we can deliver food to them directly. We deliver water bills and electricity bills, and we go and collect those bills. If we can deliver bills and government goes and takes its money, why can't government take food to the people? And so that was one of the demonstrations I wanted to make. A suggestion on accountability from Jeff Honu. Your Excellency, can you assure Ghanaians that you will demand accountability from the current government on the management of the Ghana COVID-19 Trust Fund if you become president? I don't think we have to wait till I become president to demand accountability. I think that an auditing of the COVID-19 funds should take place, and there's the constitutional body that is supposed to do that. That is the Auditor General's Department. And so I think that all who are spending the COVID-19 funds should be keeping receipts and proper documentation, because the day of accountability will surely come. From Nikpako Samoa Ado. Excellency, what policy interventions will you advocate to open medical education in Ghana along the lines of the Cuban example to allow Ghana to even start to export doctors? I believe that this is possible. Indeed, I visited Cuba, and Cuba's ratio of doctors to patients is the highest in the world. And that's why they can afford to send Cuban doctors as part of the Cuban Medical Brigade to all over the world. We should be able to do that in order that we are able to produce enough doctors, both to satisfy our own need and also to send out as many doctors as possible to the rest of the world. We can earn precious foreign exchange for it. Many countries are earning foreign exchange from their human resource. Philippines is an example. Philippines makes almost $30 billion a year from the remittances that their personnel abroad send back. In Ghana, we make only $3 billion a year, mostly from our relatives and others working abroad. We can expand this and bring in more money than any natural resource that we have. And so I think we should liberalize and open the training of doctors and health professionals. Unfortunately, not everybody agrees. In many of our professional groups, they try to limit, how many people qualify from those various groups. I mean, you remember what happened with the lawyers. I mean, some people think that there are too many lawyers, and so they should start to restrict how many people are called to the bar. And so this continues to happen. But I believe that if we go out and produce more, it will be about efficiency and how highly professional the individual is in terms of the work that he does. Cassandra Denu, how would you have handled this pandemic differently? The first thing this government could have done would have been to predict that that virus was going to get here, because it spread to Korea and some of the Asian countries first. And then after that, it was in Europe. Now, considering the traffic between China and Ghana, I'm surprised that it didn't even get in earlier than it did. But if it didn't get in directly from China, it would have come from Europe, considering how Ghanaians travel into Europe. And so we should have started taking those steps earlier. But I would say that globally, everybody was caught by surprise, because it's not only Ghana. Europe, America, even America were caught by surprise that the pandemic spread so fast. What happens is with this coronavirus is that it's more virulent than other coronaviruses that have been experienced. And so its spread has been much faster than, say, SARS or MERS. And so I think that a lot of people underestimated it. But once it had started spreading, and once we had closed the border, we should have moved to isolate it as quickly as possible, because it was still largely contained in the Greater Accra area. And so at the time, the Medical Association said we should lock down. If we had locked down Greater Accra quickly and done the isolation and testing and contact tracing, we probably would have limited it to a smaller group than it did. But once we announced we were going to lock down, people traveled to their hometowns and things. It meant that people who were infected, carried the virus outside. And that's why it's not surprising that we're seeing, outbreaks of the virus in many other regions. from Mr. Owusu Achao. Mr. Mahama, how do you feel now when Ayololo buses you introduce are now taking healthcare staff? Well, with all the social intervention measures that we introduced, we did them to benefit the Ghanaian, the ordinary Ghanaian. The Ayololo buses were supposed to supplement the Metro Mass Transit and the private sector in terms of providing efficient transportation to and fro for Ghanaians. We're starting with the Greater Accra, the Accra metropolitan area, and then we're going to expand it to Kumasi and all the other larger metropoli. Unfortunately, before we had, properly activated it, we left government, and when the new government came, I was informed that they said it was not feasible and that, it wasn't a viable project and that the buses were too expensive. There were a lot of issues that were raised, so the buses were packed. But these are items that have been funded by the taxpayer, and so if even government disagrees with the policy, you must find a way of using the buses. So I'm happy that in times like this, some use has been found for the buses. But beyond carrying health workers, when we come to normal times, I think that the use of these buses will help to give Ghanaians, a more efficient public transportation system. We need you back to build more hospitals. But why did you not complete all your hospitals before leaving office? Anyway, God bless you. Amma Yobua. Amma, thank you very much. The thing about projects is they take a period of time from gestation until completion. And so the projects, especially many of the hospitals, and I must say this clearly, were begun in Professor Mills' time when I was his vice president. Even though I worked largely on some of those portfolios, it started in Professor Mills' time, and then the funding and all those things had to be put in place, the technical drawings, the consultants and all that. And eventually, they started the construction in my time. Unfortunately, we finished some. We finished the Dodua Hospital. We largely finished the Upper West Regional Hospital, and we finished the Ridge Hospital. We finished the University of Ghana Medical Center. And unfortunately, there were several others: Fomina, Kumau, Tepa, Nsoko, and so many of them that we didn't finish. Afari, the next military hospital in Ashanti region, the Ashanti Regional Hospital, several of them, the Bolgatanga Regional Hospital. Unfortunately, we didn't finish those completely before we left office. The new government came and it had priorities other than that, and so unfortunately those projects stalled. But I've said over again that when we come, we believe that health is one of the most important ingredients of life. If you don't have good health, you don't have a good quality life. And so health is one of my priorities. And so when we come into office, one of the first things we'll do is to let those projects commence again and complete all the hospitals, abandoned hospital projects, and actually build new hospitals so that Ghanaians can have access to good health care. Riku Mafo, what strategic infrastructure do you think we need to fight pandemics in future? We need access to good modern health facilities. And in every health facility, if we had all those hospitals working, we could have separated wards and turned them into isolation wards at this time, so that we don't have to bring everybody, several kilometers down with the risk of infection to isolation wards, say in Accra. I hear the government has dedicated the University of Ghana Medical Center and the Ghana East Hospital as the principal medical facilities for treating COVID patients. But if we had finished all these projects, we could have taken sections of the wards and created isolation centers in many places. And so because we don't have that in many places, government is looking for schools and other places. But because they have not involved the chiefs and educated the chiefs and the assemblymen, then what is happening is every community you go to and you say you're going to set up an isolation center in one of the school blocks that is not being used, the people rise up and chase the people out. And that is the reason why you must involve the stakeholders, the chiefs, the traditional rulers, the assemblymen, the religious leaders. You must involve them. Because if you do, then they will understand that you're using the school temporarily, and that when you finish it's going to be fumigated. There's no risk that there will be infection of the locals, and that when it's all done, you must have some incentive for them, for sacrificing for us to use your school. Government will do this infrastructural project for you. And so these are things you can use to bring the people on board. Unfortunately, that has not been done. People just appear, they go and look at the school, and then you hear, almost on the school, no be isolation center, and obviously they will refuse. And so I think we need to look at that. From Abeku Hayford in Cape Coast. Your Excellency, what are your plans for using science and technology in Ghana to fight future pandemics and to stabilize Ghana's economy? It is important that indeed, the pandemic has been good, has got some good outcomes in a way. A lot of us have learned how to use social and digital media of mass communication to be able to do business without having to physically move. And so in that way, we must continue that when we come out of this. We must use ICT technology so that where it is not necessary for people to move physically to a particular location, you can sit at home and have a teleconference. I had a virtual teleconference, a Zoom conference with my COVID team. I have had Zoom conferences with our political committee. I speak using WhatsApp video with several of my comrades in the morning if I need them to do something. And so I realized that a lot of the time we used to sit in cars and go outside, to go and meet physically. It wasn't necessary to do so. But we must use telemedicine. We must introduce telemedicine. And as I said, we must establish a national infectious diseases center, which is much like the CDC in the US, the Center for Disease Control, I think, CDC. We must establish that here, which researches on pandemics, it researches on endemic illnesses, and predicts when there are going to be outbreaks, and advises government when and what time government should start preparations for anything. For instance, the Center for Disease Control in Ghana, the National Infectious Diseases Center, should be able to predict that the CSM period is coming in. You need this number of vaccines. You need this number of personnel to do this awareness program. You must start it at this time so that you don't have more people dying. The cholera season is coming. You must start public awareness. You must ensure that water is flowing properly so that people don't, use contaminated water. These are things that, such a center can do. It can look at diseases outside, and when there's an outbreak somewhere, say that, look, we better watch this. This disease could spread to Ghana. And so it's something that I'm committed to, and it's something we'll activate if, by the grace of God and the grace of the Ghanaian people, I get elected as president. How would you have felt if your opponents were virtually running parallel structures under your rule in such a situation as we are in? Is it prudent to be constantly in the public domain preferring solutions rather than share your ideas with the appropriate authority, which is the presidency? Well, I don't have that channel of communication with the presidency, unfortunately. And if I had that channel, I probably could have made those suggestions. As I said in the first answer to the first question, I'm being a citizen, and I believe that in being a citizen, I should prefer whatever suggestions I have, and that is what I have sought to do. I set up a COVID team to help, the national response team. And our COVID team has been meeting, and they have presented 2 reports to the national response team. They discussed the responses with me. I went through them with it with them, and we made suggestions. Some of these suggestions that I have made publicly are contained in the reports of our COVID team that were presented to government. And so it's not that I just make them publicly. We also have them on paper, and our COVID team has presented 2 reports to government so far since this outbreak. We've tried to lend our collaboration to government as best as we can, and I hope that we have been helpful. I'm not a fan of this man, but to be sincere, his response and action towards the fight against this virus has really made me feel ashamed of myself. I think he has won my love and interest in him. I pray that God will strengthen him for me and Ghana as a whole. And this is from Ajay Samuel. Ajay Samuel, I thank you for your kind words. And as long as I continue to have life and God grants me good health, I will give back to my country what my country has given to me. I believe my country has been generous to me, and it is my country that has made me who I am. And until I'm 6 feet in the ground, with every energy available to me, I'll continue to participate in public discourse and to offer the best suggestions that I have. Don McElvis, how do you feel being condemned by the MPP about the hospitals you built, but now being used as treatment centers? I think I've answered this question already, and I just feel grateful that whatever we did has become useful at this time in helping to save Ghanaian lives. And so I don't feel a sense of vindication. I think that all these were built with the taxpayer of the taxpayers' money of Ghana, and we must make use of them. If by the grace of God and the permission of the Ghanaian people I become president again, everything that this government has used taxpayers' money for will not be left abandoned. We'll finish them, because it's a waste, to use taxpayers' money, leave half-completed hospitals. You're paying the loans for them, and yet you won't complete them so that Ghanaians can use them. Emmanuel Riku, Your Excellency, what do you say about the NHIA that has kept most clinics on their knees at this critical moment? The least said about the NHIA, the better. The modeling that was done of the NHIA showed that it would last a certain number of years. And so before I left office, I made a committee do an extensive review of the NHIA and to see how we could get additional funds in to prolong the life of the NHIA. I believe that that review exists, and if government can take a look at it, we are taking a look at it, and in our manifesto, we will include some of the things that will be necessary to prolong the life of the NHIA. Unfortunately, the NHIA is in a worse condition. It was said that under my administration, the NHIA was in the Mah Tree or was about to die. It is now even closer to death than before. I hear that some service providers have not been paid for more than 10 months. Others have not been paid for 6 months, and it's created a major problem, because when I went on the speak out, in most places people complained that if you went, the only thing you got free was the card and consulting. Aside from that, all medicine, paracetamol and everything, you had to go out and buy. And so we have to see how we can resuscitate the NHIA. All too soon, we're almost at the end of this conversation. We're going to have further conversations, digital conversations going forward on the kind of world that we're going to see after this pandemic, and I want you to join me when I call on you. So let me thank all of you for joining, who have found time to join this conversation. It is a pledge. I thank you for joining this conversation, and it is a pledge I'm making to make myself available for more interactions, and I will continue to do that. For those who have registered to join the Let's Talk initiative on my website, www.johnmahama.org, I thank you, and I'll be engaging with you all as I promised. And I urge government to help the poor and vulnerable. They need help, and let's continue to be compassionate and to feed them. Let us also protect our health workers. They need PPEs and the basic tools to be able to care for us and to be motivated. And let's continue to stay safe, to protect ourselves and our families. And I thank you to all, I'd say thank you to all our media partners that have helped expand the reach of this conversation from online to TV and radio. And I wish the sick God's almighty healing. And ladies and gentlemen, good night, and thank you for joining this live digital conversation. May Allah bless all of you, especially as we go into the month of Ramadan, and may the Almighty God continue to bless all of us and our homeland Ghana. Akpena mi medamwase. Nago de Kore, Ansan Kushung in my own Gonja, Netuma Pampam in Dagbani, and which one? Yadase. Good night and thank you. She's at home. Okay. Tell her I came and gave her something small, okay, to feed the family during this period. You heard about the sickness that is around. What do they say you should do? You should wash your hands all the time and stay home, okay? Okay. Okay. You should use sanitizer too if you have it. If you don't have it, just use soap and use running water and wash your hands, okay? And then try and stay safe, okay? All right. Okay. All right, let's go. Mama, do your thing. Good. What about Hanya? No coffee. Bonu Helaniba. I came off your attachment. Oh no. What about how about Omo? Secret 4. Yo, couldn't hold no ha. It be on me. Okay. Yo. Amen. How you doing? Good. Yeah, how are you doing? So there's something small for you and the family, okay? All right. God bless you. All right. Do your thing. Good. Mohe. Benye nu helani ba. Na ke mo fi amo attaché. Okay. Ninya feminine. Ninya forward de ke nu ke jale ke oye sanitizer. Aha. No cafe. Oh no. He wa ke no coffee abahanye. Continue ho nye ha beke bien. Oh no. Yo. Nye adon. Nye adon. He wa ke no coffee ni wa ke bahanye. Koni oho ha beke bien. No today. How are you? Good. How are you doing? Okay. So that as you're at home, at least you have some food to eat. So we have some spaghetti. We have some oil. Then we have some sugar. You have some sardine. You have some sardine here. And then you have some rice. Yeah. We have some rice. And so cook for the children. How are you? Good. Mama, you're doing well? Okay. So we brought you a little something so that you can cook for your grandchildren. Somebody is there. She's also got stroke. Oh, okay. So get some. Okay. Use it to buy medicine. Okay. All right. Okay. You want to join it? Open here, Tisan. Very good. What out here? Okay. Oh yeah, Juma Ben. Oh yeah, Mason. Oh. No, so what's even quite Juma? It's what if you? Oh. Yo. And yeah, somewhat in the Abba. Yari Abba. And the Abba say Yansana Fee. Me and Ppes by hat. What I say. And the Abraham Munyoma Kakra. And the Monfantu Fee na. Munyaman kwada no kakra. Right. Nyamia do menche bia ade ni nyina beko. No atimi akwadwuma biom. Right. Okay. Aiko. All right. So what do you do? Carpenter. Oh, carpenter. So because of this you can't go to work. You have to stay at home. Okay. All right. We brought you something small. Some rice, some sugar. You manage it small. Okay. Stay at home and look after yourself. You have to be safe, okay? Don't shake hands with anybody. And then keep your distance. When you go out, you see somebody, stay a distance away from them. Okay. Beautiful girl. How are you? Beautiful girl. Oh, she's a nice girl. Is that your daughter? Okay, where is your husband? Yeah, but why is he gone when government says he should stay at home? Where is he gone? Okay, we brought you a few items. Take care of yourselves, okay? All right. Yeah, that was it. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. As the authorities have said, we should continue to maintain social distancing. We should wash our hands frequently with running water. And then we should also avoid mass gatherings. And so where you see plenty people gathered, don't go into the crowd so that you prevent yourself from getting the coronavirus. Also, people should stay home as much as possible. I mean, if you have nothing very important doing, don't come out. Just stay at home so that we can slow down the spread of the disease. We've come and distributed some food to a few houses. There are some more left to do. We've got our volunteers who are going to go to other houses and distribute them. But it's just our widow's mite, a little contribution that we have to assist people during this period. So we're praying that coronavirus will disappear from our country soon, and that God will heal our land, and that we'll be able to come back to normal as quickly as possible. Let us all collaborate with the government and with the health authorities so that they can protect us and from this coronavirus. So thank you very much, and God richly bless our homeland, Ghana.